I'll join palms. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Palms down. So, good evening, everybody. Somebody said recently, they don't think they weren't sure if the practice is working. And it was a fun dialogue and discussion, because if we go into something expecting something to work, that means we have some attachment to the outcome. And we want things to be a certain way. And when they are not that way, we get frustrated, we get angry, we get sad, we get irritated, and that causes dukkha, causes suffering. And if you take that same approach with Buddhist practice, then it kind of defeats the entire essence of what the practice is about, which is learning to just be with things as they are and not look at the kind of idea of, is this working or is this not working, right? And most of you have heard me say a lot that every day of our lives, things are going to go completely differently from what we expect. And every day of our lives, we're going to be challenged with difficulty, faced with things happening in our immediate lives and the world around us that we're just not okay with. And it causes a little bit of discomfort in our lives. And so if we then think that this Buddhism thing is going to fix all of that, we're taking, I really think, an unhealthy view and an unhealthy approach to what this practice is really about. And I think even in just talking now, I probably said practice 3, 4, 5 times, and that it's just a daily practice. It's not about getting wrapped up in, is this working or is this not working? Or am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? That's what I say constantly during the meditation. It's just bringing this practice into your life and observing your life as you go through it. And then you kind of can abandon this idea of, does this stuff work? You know, if you have a headache and you take 2 Advil and the headache goes away, then the Advil worked, right? If you have a headache, you take 2 Advil and the headache doesn't go away, then the Advil didn't work. So my suggestion is, don't use Buddhism with that same mindset. Just practice it. Practice being kind, practice being forgiving, practice being compassionate, practice all of these kind of key buzzwords that you hear about in Buddhism. And just practice them every day. And try to abandon this idea or expectation of gaining something. And just work on being present with things as they are. And that in and itself is why this practice is so difficult, because very often we don't want to just be with how things are. We want to change them, fix them, and correct them. And so, for me, practice the Buddhist teachings, it was great because it was finally something that I wasn't trying, once I really understood, at least in my mind, what it was about, it was finally something that I couldn't win. There was no winning involved. And once I was met with something that you couldn't win, it became the perfect thing for me because I had to abandon what I spent my entire life trying to do, which was win something, right? Win some place, win something, win some person. And this was no winning. So with that, we'll go ahead and sit. We'll do a meditation practice. Hopefully you'll do it right. Those who are here for the first time or maybe sitting for the first time, a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Okay, don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working? Is this not working? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside the room. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And the practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on the cushions, often it helps. Slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed, hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever is comfortable. If you're on the chairs or benches, also just trying to sit up straight. Shoulders relaxed. If you need to move, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, it just means your leg hurts. If your arm itches, simply scratch your arm and come back to stillness. I'll guide us as we begin. We'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. And throughout the practice, you'll hear sounds. These are not distractions, not disruptions. Simply what's happening around us as we sit. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Gently guide the attention, focus to the stomach or chest, Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments of the practice. Just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. each thought, each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, resting, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, just as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths. slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. Most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, it's quiet, calm, still, or a busy mind, racing mind. Whatever you're sitting with at this moment has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakening. He was a human being no different than anyone in this room that began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for every one of us in this room, regardless of where we come from or what we believe in or where we think we're going, our whole life is filled with things that happen. We react. More stuff happens, more reactions. This is our life. The practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within all of that. Most people respond to meditation quietly, peacefully, still. The question is, how do you respond to everything else that happens throughout your day? And so all we're working on is closing the gap where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Imagine going a day without being disturbed by someone. The night is young, most of you won't make it home before you're disturbed by someone. All right? This practice is not necessarily easy. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation, Buddhist practice, is probably the hardest thing you'll ever have to do. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and every other person you encounter every moment of your life. And that's why it's difficult. We just have to work on being nice to every single person we see. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything around us, which is where we spend so much of our time, hoping they do this, hoping they do that, wishing they would do this, wishing they would do that. So much time trying to control people and places and things around us. And this practice is about waking up to what you can control, which is your thoughts, your words, and your actions. That's what we get. The ability to wake up every day and learn to have control over our thoughts and our words and our actions. And that's difficult. Especially if all of your thoughts and words and actions aren't so kind. Which I'm sure is none of you in this room. Right? It takes the practice of patience to go through this path. It really requires kind of being honest and open with your challenges, your struggles, your difficulties. And often it's easier to just kind of pretend they're not there, bury them, sweep them under a rug, ignore them, escape from them. The things we would typically do when we have things in our lives that aren't so comfortable. And this practice is facing them and looking at them and being honest with them and working through them. And learning to be authentic and true to yourself and who you are and how you are. For all the joy and all the pain, all the beauty and all the madness. Just be real with it. And try to laugh once in a while. It helps. Don't take this practice so seriously. It's my suggestion. I find Buddhists to be some of the most attached people to things I've ever known in my entire life, which I find quite ironic, considering the entire essence of the Buddhist teachings is to work on non-attachment, right? Clinging, non-attachment to views, judgments. And then we find our Buddhist path and we get so darn attached to it. So, I'm not going to talk too much on that right now. I've already talked enough, but just begin to recognize how attached we are to things and I don't know. Learn to laugh at yourself. Once I did that, it made life a lot easier. So I'll open up to questions. I'd rather just address questions on meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with, and kind of go from there. Yes.
As someone who is first time here in a very short period of time, how does this all get started?
How does this all get started?
Yeah.
When you say this, define this, that will determine how short of a time I have to answer this question. What do you mean by this?
Buddhism.
How did Buddhism get started?
Mm-hmm.
There was a man named Siddhartha Gautama, and he was a prince. He lived 500 years before Christ. Welcome, by the way. What's your name?
Bruce.
Bruce, thanks for being here, Bruce. This is also my first time here, so we have something in common. He lived 500 years before Christ, and he was a prince. I'll sum the whole thing up in like 60 seconds. He had everything, all the wealth, all the riches, everything you could imagine. And when he was born, it was said that he would either become a great king or an awakened one. And so his father sheltered him, wanted him to be a great king. 29 years old, he sneaks out of the palace. This is basically what today is kind of Nepal region and southern part. and sees what's called the four sights. He saw an old person. It happens over 4 trips, but to keep the story brief, old person, sick person. He saw death, and he saw an ascetic, kind of a happy, peaceful, simple, like a nun or a monk. And he said to his buddy, I've never seen old age, sickness, and death. What is this? Does this happen to all of us? And his buddy Chana said, yes, we all age, we all get sick, we all die. We cannot escape it. So 29 years old, he snuck out in the middle of the night and realized how could he live with all the wealth and riches in the world when there was a whole world out there that suffered. So he roamed the base of the Himalayan mountains for 6 years. 35, he sat down under the Bodhi tree, and you can go see it today in Bodh Gaya, India. He said, I'm not moving until I figure out why we suffer. And 21 days he sat there. Now, this is also after like thousands and thousands of rebirths, so don't get too excited thinking you can do it in 21 days. It'll take you at least 28, you know? And he realized that we suffer because of greed, anger, ignorance, pride, ego, craving, desire, attachment, whatever word you want to throw in there. And at 35, these 5 guys came back and they looked at him. They were his buddies he was traveling with, and they said, it looks like he's figured something out. We will call him the Buddha, the awakened one. He roamed around for 45 years. He taught basically 2 things, why we suffer and how we can end suffering or suffer less. And in 80, he died. And then, 100, 200 years later, teachings go south in Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia. You have the development of what's called Theravada or Hinayana Buddhism. 500, 600 years later, it goes north, China, Japan, Korea. You have Mahayana Buddhism. 1,000 years after he died, roughly, it goes into Tibet. You have the development of Vajrayana or Tibetan Buddhism. And, roughly somewhere between 70, 100 years ago, depending upon who you ask, it makes its way into the West, US, Canada, Europe. And somehow it made its way into a 91-year-old Christian mystic church here called the Dharma Bum Temple. So that's how this all started. It's like one big long game of, telephone. Like you sit in a circle and you telephone, right? Is that what it's called? Right? You tell the person next to you one thing, then it goes around the circle, and that's what's been going on for 2,500 years. Yeah. Does that help?
Yes.
Yeah. My pleasure. How'd you feel after meditation?
Calm.
When was the last time you felt calm? Don't say 1986.
I'm 65. Still working on it.
Yeah. Who made you feel calm tonight? Who specifically?
Don't understand the question.
I know, it sounds, who? Your name is Bruce, right?
Yeah.
So who made Bruce feel calm?
Bruce.
Bruce. Who is Bruce stuck with every day? Like it or not, I'm sure you're great. Yourself. What this teaches you in the matter of 5, 10, 20 minutes, going nowhere, doing nothing, spending no money, sitting and breathing, you can feel calm. Most of us spend 65 years of our lives trying to figure out how to feel calm. And you know what you did to feel calm? Nothing. Don't forget that. Thanks for being here. Okay. Other questions? Yeah.
So in the beginning, you were talking about how it's not a good idea to judge or put expectations on your meditation. But then a little later, it seemed like you kind of, at the end you said, how do you feel?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just wondering why it seemed almost hypocritical that
Yeah.
at the end you were.
Half of what I say is hypocritical and dualistic and meant to shatter the way we see the world, because the way we've been doing it so far doesn't work, first off, right? But to that question specifically, it's important to recognize what this practice does to us, right? Bruce is 65, he's never done a meditation before. I said, how do you feel? And I put a question out there that put him in a situation to judge his personal experience with it, right? So the Buddha taught that craving and desire leads to suffering. But he also said that there are healthy cravings, healthy desires. One of them is the desire to end suffering, right? Part of the desire to end suffering comes from being, or part of the process, I should say, includes being aware of present moment experiences, feelings, sensations, right? To think that we're going to go through any of our lives, any moment of our lives and not judge things is pretty foolish, right? As I speak right now, I agree, I disagree, I like what he's saying, I don't like what he's saying. That's what we do, is we judge things. Now, coming back to the meditation practice, the process of it itself, I do think it's extremely important to not judge it, but to be with it, to be aware. What is the sensation that's arising? As the Buddha taught, is it pleasant? Is it unpleasant? Or is it neutral? What is it? But not to critique it, not to judge it, not to think, well, this is an unpleasant experience. Because if we look at something as an unpleasant experience, we might then assign some label to it, such as this doesn't work, or it's not helping, or it's not fixing, as opposed to just being with it, right? Does that make sense?
So,
Yeah. I mean, if it doesn't, that's okay too, you know? But I do think it's important to not get wrapped up in, and this is so common for new meditators or new people to this practice. You know, what have we been doing most of our lives with everything? I mean, why do mirrors exist? You know? I mean, how many mirrors do we have in the house, in the car? You know, we walk by a window. You know, you're like me, we don't have to worry about the hair too much anymore, right? But like, we're constantly looking in mirrors, judging, critiquing, fixing. And the beauty of the meditation practice is to let it be one thing in our lives that we don't try to judge, and that's free, and that we can value. But don't lose sight of the awareness of what it's doing. Because I believe it is that awareness of what's happening that continues to motivate us and continue our meditation practice, you know? I mean, I kind of walked into it, Bruce could have said, well, that sucked, I hated it, right? And that probably wouldn't have been the most motivating factor for him to continue. Does that make sense? So awareness is very different from judgment, you know?
okay, thanks.
Yeah, for sure. But I contradict myself constantly. So, yeah, I mean, any sort of Zen practice, Zen books, the Heart Sutra, the essence of the Mahayana Buddhist teaching, says there is no suffering, there's no cause of suffering, there's no cessation of suffering, and there is no path whatsoever. And the very first thing the Buddha taught is there is suffering, there is a cause, there is a cessation, and there is a path. So, blame the Buddha. I'm just, you know, yeah.
So I haven't read the story myself. I've only heard you talk about it, but I know I've been like, it's like a riddle. I've been trying to piece it out in my head. So I know that the Buddha behind you, the skinny one, is him right before he found the middle path, when he was really, he felt that he struggled with, like, how do I achieve wisdom? So it was how I understand what you talked about. And I know behind him is the embodiment of compassion. And so I've been trying to figure out, maybe there's nothing to figure out. Maybe this is just me in my head. But if he being skinny, you know, where he is right now, if he thought he was doing the right thing, then why does he need compassion?
Because he wasn't doing the right thing.
Yeah, he was making himself suffer.
Yeah, he was near death.
Yeah.
You know, that's a tough one. And that, you probably heard me use this expression, but, you know, we use these unenlightened minds to try to comprehend, process, and integrate these enlightened teachings into our lives, right? So if I'm a greedy, angry, ignorant person and I read a bunch of Buddhist books, that doesn't mean I'm not still a greedy, angry, ignorant person. Now I'm just a greedy, angry, ignorant person that's read a lot of books, right? The practice is to begin to take these teachings and integrate them into your life. You know, one example years ago is a great teacher. He said, the first step on the Eightfold Path is a correct view, right? So I ran through very quickly, but for those who are brand new, the Buddha said, first thing, Four Noble Truths, life is suffering. This first one. Second one is the cause, greed, anger, ignorance. The third one is the ending of it, liberation, nirvana. The fourth one is the path, and that's the Eightfold Path. These are fundamental, basic Buddhist teachings. And the first one on the Eightfold Path is the correct view. So this, to me, really addresses the nature of your question, that sure, at that point in time, if he thought he was correct, then he wouldn't recognize that compassion was necessary, right? So teacher years ago, he said, if you get on the 15 freeway and you want to go to Poway, and you go south, you're not getting to Poway. But in our minds, we think we're correct. And to me, that's one of the beautiful parts of what Sangha, what community is about, right? I said this earlier, right? If I walked up to somebody on the street and said, you're greedy, angry, and ignorant, they'd probably punch me, right? You say that in a Buddhist community, they're like, oh, thank you. You know, so it's about recognizing that our views might not be correct. And that's difficult because what do we spend our entire lives doing? Defending our views, proving our views, acting on our views, right? And Thich Nhat Hanh, his definition in a talk he gave is when he talks about nirvana, he says nirvana is freedom from views. So it also kind of goes back to the other question. It's going beyond judgment, right? But coming back to the emaciated Buddha, where he was living on 1 grain of rice a day and nearly starving himself to death, it's a good thing that he recognized that he needed to eat because he was physically unhealthy. And I like the metaphors of the emaciated Buddha because we can, whether it's physically, emotionally, spiritually, right? We're often near death in many ways. And we want to have compassion for ourselves, but then we also, you know, the two wings to Buddhism are wisdom and compassion. So compassion, yes, but wisdom is important. I don't know if that helps at all, but at least gives you other things to look at. Yeah. Yes.
The statues before us, can you please tell me who they are, what they are?
Yes.
Also, why you chose them,
Yes.
and why are they there?
Yes. Sure. Because this will be the first time this question's been asked in the last, since March 11th. So let me start by saying every time I love this question because every time I say it differently. Since we are now doing everything on YouTube, you can hear me answer this like probably 6 different ways now. And that's the beautiful part about it, right? Why we chose them specifically was there was a couple, and it's almost done, but we'll be putting out the whole story behind it, right? And there's a couple that has been around for about 6, 7 years, somewhere in there, 5 years. And they've been around Dharma Bums here since the beginning, Old Buddha for You days. And they used to come into this space, and it was pretty empty up here, right? And they really wanted to complete the space. So for our 1-year anniversary in this new location a year ago, they gifted these 4 tankas. These 4, the art pieces up here, these are called tankas, very traditional Tibetan Buddhist practices, right? And so you have Manjushri Bodhisattva for wisdom, you have Amitabha Buddha, the Buddha of the Pure Land, you have the Medicine Buddha for health and healing, and you have Chenrezig, the Tibetan version of Kuan Yin, right? So these were gifted, and then they would come in. They come a lot during the day when nobody's here, and it's also a beautiful time. And they would sit, and they felt it was very important to put pieces up here that would move people and that had a presence. And for myself, and those of us kind of from the Dharma Bums, we come from a very traditional Taiwanese Buddhist background. That's not what we roll into the Dharma Bum temple, because if we were all in robes and bowing and chanting and reciting the Buddha's name, there'd be about 2 of you left, right? We actually started the Dharma Bums to strip away the cultural layers of Buddhism and the rituals and the form and things like that, because that's not why people come here. But that doesn't mean that those practices aren't still embedded in who we are, and that doesn't mean that those practices aren't important for the last 2,500 years, right? So for this couple, they said, what would be appropriate, what would be proper? And they wanted to gift it. And I initially said no. I didn't want to do it, right? And I won't go into that too much tonight. I'm in a different space, but there's a talk I gave on that, right? And I didn't want to do it. I just felt we didn't need it. I was wrong. My view was wrong, right? What we needed was to honor the intention behind this couple's gift. And what they said, and they recognize, is that this is not for Jeff, for Maggie, for any of the people around here. It's not even for the temple. It's for everybody who's going to come into the Dharma bums over the next 100, 200 years. And it's a presence that will outlive us all. And it's very proper, right? And again, this is Jeff's lens, Jeff's view. We picked the emaciated Buddha because he represented who we were on the path, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, near death. And if we didn't get our act together, we were going to die. So this we've sat with for now our 13th year to remind us where we are at on this journey and that we need to wake up, right? These three pieces, which were very carefully thought about and chosen, this one specifically is Samantabhadra. He is a bodhisattva, an enlightened being, and he represents the great practice, the great effort, the great diligence, right? To continue to work. And he had 10 great vows, which I said last week, I'll have the 10 memorized soon, but it was only last week, so I don't have them memorized yet. And he sits on an elephant with 6 tusks, and the 6 tusks represent the paramitas: generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, wisdom. These are the 6 practices that this temple is founded on. This is the path of the bodhisattva that takes you from a world of suffering into a world of peace, happiness, joy. Generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, wisdom. So this is Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, right? This is Manjushri Bodhisattva. Manjushri represents ultimate wisdom. Very often you see Manjushri with a sword, right? In Mahayana Buddhism, specifically in the Vimalakirti Sutra, he's referenced sitting on a lion. And the lion represents the mind. So the anger, the ignorance, the greed that we use the sword of wisdom to cut through, the lion represents the taming of the mind. That wisdom is what it would be required, or what it would require to tame a wild lion, right? So here, the bodhisattva of wisdom sits peacefully with the lion representing the taming of the one thing that causes all of your suffering, which is what? Yes, he pointed to his head. A wise student you are, right? It's our minds. The mind causes our suffering. So this is Manjushri Bodhisattva. And then behind me is the Kuan Yin Bodhisattva. Kuan Yin, her name means hearer of the world's cries. She hears all the suffering in the world and pours out compassion to heal. Asian culture, even beyond Buddhism, she's seen as the goddess of mercy and compassion. Right? In Vietnam, when they were fleeing from the refugee camps, they would look up in the sky, and the stories that they saw Kuan Yin on a dragon in the clouds, leading them to safety. The Dalai Lama, they say, is the literal rebirth of the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin. And when we talked about what do we need in this temple? What do we need in this community? What do we need in this country? What do we need in this world? Endless compassion. And so since we had our Buddha, emaciated Buddha, we felt most appropriate to have the Bodhisattva of compassion holding or pouring, and in this case, she's pouring out the base of compassion. So kind of going back to your question, the emaciated Buddha, he needed the compassion. So the compassion gets poured onto him. And I said this the first couple times I sat up here, like I just felt this overwhelming sense of compassion. And it really comes back to the individuals who drove this gift. Because it's not easy to convince me to do something I don't want to do. I'm a stubborn dude, you know, and it meant more to them than anything I could ever even imagine. And it moves them to tears, it still does, to have this here. So, I'm endlessly grateful. It was a year process, 7-8 months to make them. The shrine tables, same thing. Took about 3 months to make these. So it's been a year-long process that we have almost completed retelling via text the entire story. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the question, I do. And I'm sure if you look at the other 5 times I talked about this, I promise I probably contradicted myself. It's my disclaimer. Yeah. Yes.
I don't know where to fit this in,
Uh-huh.
and you can cut me off
No,
if you need to.
no, no.
But always you ask when we come out of meditation, somebody asks a question and you say, and how do you feel now? And it makes me, every time, it makes me think of my first beginnings in meditation. Every time the group I was in, we would finish, and everybody would say, "Oh, I feel so refreshed." And that's not at all how I experienced it at all.
Right.
And I struggled with that for several years. And finally realized I was doing myself more harm than good. I wasn't feeling refreshed, so either I was misunderstanding how to do it right, or I just wasn't meant to be refreshed. So I guess I would just like to say, if somebody finds themselves in a group and says, we're all here because we want to know more about Buddhism. If you find yourself with a Buddhist group and something doesn't ring true, and you give it a bit of time and it never rings true, then it's okay to find another group or to take a vacation or something. And if you walk into a place and you see the statues and are offended like I was at first, stick around long enough to find out the story about them, but then if it still isn't a good fit, it is okay to move and find another group.
Yeah, I thought about it, but I decided to stay.
But there's not one answer.
Right, no.
And the group that I was with was a very closed group. Nobody new ever came. So the culture of that group was to be refreshed.
Yes.
And that's a dynamic in a lot of groups, and so just be aware and use the wisdom we're supposed to be developing.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, a few comments on that. One is that the funny thing is when I say, how do you feel, right? I don't say, do you all feel good? I just say, pay attention to how you feel. And many years ago, many meaning probably 6, and this individual who has since passed, and she was young too, she said, after you would have loved her, she said after meditation, was that Buddha for you? After meditation one time, she raised her hand and she made a very similar comment. And she said, does anybody else feel like there's 1,000 knives in their head? And it was really brave because what she did was she was kind of going against what she thought everybody was expecting, right? And I don't lead it this way, but I don't meditate personally to feel better. If you're angry and in a bad mood, sometimes doing a meditation means you're just going to be sitting with your anger and be in a bad mood. And it might make it worse. So to echo what you were saying, don't think that meditation is always going to make you feel good. It won't. Right? Bruce, I hate to, now I got to go back to Bruce. So this was a wonderful calming experience. You might do this tomorrow and you're like, I hate this, it sucks. So it's going to be, to me, the practice of meditation isn't to feel good. Right? The Buddha didn't wake up and say, let's all go out and make sure we feel good. The practice is to become aware of how you feel. To be with how you feel. I recognize the side effect often, not always. Often as people feel calmer, they feel more relaxed, they feel a little slower, but not always. Right? And so if you couldn't hear everything that Laverne was saying, If you do a meditation or you go through this practice and you feel miserable, that's quite okay. Don't think you're failing or it's not working, you know? And the second thing about various communities, I was explaining this to the college group, that when you build a Sangha, a community around Buddhism, when you build anything, right, there's an intention that goes in to that place or that community and that practice. And when you have a place that brings together, I mean, all of you in this room, it's ridiculous how different you are, right? I mean, everything can always be more diverse, but being around the Dharma Bum community and the college group's the same thing. It's as about diverse as a Buddhist community I've ever seen, with a lot of room to improve, right? But the understanding is that you just bring into the space what you bring into the space. And there will always be Buddhist places you go to that you'll love and you'll feel comfortable. And there will be Buddhist places that you go to and you'll know 5 minutes in, you're like, not for me. And then I suggest you stay for the hour wherever you go, right? Or if you're here and you walked in and after 5 minutes, you're like, no, this place isn't for me. Thank you for staying, right? And then you recognize, not my path. And that honesty, I think, is really important. Yeah. It's important to become aware of what we're sitting with. And as I said to somebody earlier, someone said years ago, if you're really into Tibetan Buddhism, you should probably find a Zen practice. And if you're really into Zen Buddhism, you should probably find a Tibetan practice. And what I learned from this statement was that we tend to gravitate towards people, places, food, everything that we like. And we want to go towards what we like because it makes us comfortable. I mean, have you ever gone out for terrible food and said, yes, I'm going back there tomorrow? It doesn't happen. But if this practice isn't about feeling good, but it's about waking up to the true nature of who we are, then it's often important to balance that with putting ourselves at times in situations that are a little bit uncomfortable. Safety, of course, always within reason. Always important. I'm not saying put yourself in unhealthy, unsafe situations. But if we're always trying to fix everything to be exactly how we want it to be, then we're really missing a lot of what this practice is about. This practice isn't about making things how we want it. It's learning to be with things as they are. And those are two very different things. Right? Yeah. Any final question? We'll do one more question. Thought or comment? Anyone sitting with wants to share how they feel? Yeah.
At one point you say everything is beautiful in the guide. And I always have a hard time with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I guess, first of all, what's the, my circle of influence, how far does that duty extend? Because the further I go out, the worse it gets.
Based on your views.
Based on my views.
Yeah. Yeah, I choose to say everything beautiful just as it is because psychologically, emotionally, practically, logically, realistically, it's a healthier approach than saying everything sucks exactly as it is. Right? And so there's all this Buddhist stuff we talk about. Endless wisdom, endless compassion. Do you know how challenged every one of us is going to be with that the rest of tonight? There's, in Buddhism, what you look at is conventional reality and ultimate reality. Ultimate reality is all the stuff we talk about. Conventional reality is, I'm going to walk outside or wherever you go and like or dislike people, places, and things. And I can choose to either hate everything and think everything sucks. I did that for a long time. That didn't help. Or I can choose to see the beauty in everything, in everyone, in all the pain, in all the suffering, in all the anger, and all the rage, and all the violence. I can understand that that individual or individuals or people who are causing tremendous pain, tremendous harm, are suffering as well. And that they are doing what they think is best. So I see the beauty in what is called Buddha nature, which is that everybody has the ability to awaken. You look at the history of Buddhism and great stories of, these, even King Asoka, who was he was a ruler, he was a king. And the story is that he, slaughtered hundreds of thousands of people, dead on the battlefield, bloody, disgusting, right? And in one moment, he realized people shouldn't suffer anymore. Buddhism exists because of King Asoka. It was dying in India, or dead. I'm not a scholar historian, but Buddhism never would have survived if it weren't for King Asoka, who revitalized Buddhism after murdering thousands and thousands of people. So I very carefully choose that word, and I've been saying it forever, because if I look at things and I think they're ugly and disgusting, that tends to foster a feeling of hatred. And if I have a feeling of hatred cultivated inside of me, it's not going to be a good outcome, because I know what that's like. I've been down that road. If I can see things in this world that I think are disgusting and terrible and horrific, and I can see that every individual has the ability to awaken, then I can cultivate compassion for the individual. And if I bring compassion to what I consider disgusting situation, maybe there's an opportunity for change. It's an example I give often. I haven't said it in a while, but after Vietnam, after the war, and the monks were asked what was their greatest fear when they were being tortured. And they said their greatest fear was losing compassion for the individual who was torturing them. Right? We have a hard time keeping compassion for the person who made our latte the wrong way. Oh, they brought my food out and it wasn't cooked properly. Oh, this person wants to get in this lane in front of me. How dare they? It's my lane, my time, my freeway. So I choose to see the beauty in everything, because it's the only way that my mind and my heart can get through this crazy world. Yeah. But probably 10 years ago, I would have hated that line as well. So, yeah, thanks. All right, so I'm going to close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Annie's mother during her time of rebirth, and to Annie and her family and friends who suffer at this time. May they all be at peace and free from suffering. May we all be at peace and free from suffering.